When struggling artist Camila Santos accidentally stumbles into mysterious Russian art collector Maxim at her waitressing job, she has no idea that her life is about to be painted in entirely new colors. Despite their instant attraction, Maxim's wealth and sophisticated world seem universes apart from Camila's vibrant but humble life in Rio's artistic community. As Maxim's patronage helps launch her career, Camila finds herself falling for the enigmatic collector who sees the extraordinary in her art. But when her passion for authenticity clashes with the dark shadows of the international art world, Camila must decide if love is worth the price of admission to a life she never imagined. Set against the colorful backdrop of Rio de Janeiro's art scene, The Art of Love is a passionate tale of two people from different worlds, bound together by their love of art and their growing feelings for each other. Chapter 1. The Canvas of Dreams. The rhythmic tapping of Camila Santos's worn sandals echoed through the narrow cobblestone streets of Santa Teresa. Golden sunlight filtered through the lush canopy of trees lining the bohemian neighborhood, casting dappled shadows on the vibrant street art adorning every available surface. Camila's fingers, stained with a rainbow of acrylic hues, absent-mindedly traced the strap of her tattered canvas bag. Inside, her sketchbook bulged with dreams yet to be realized, each page a testament to the fire that burned within her, a fire that refused to be extinguished by the harsh realities of life in Rio de Janeiro. As she rounded the corner, the familiar scent of cafezinho wafted from Dona Maria's tiny cafe. The old woman's wrinkled face broke into a warm smile as Camila approached.
Bon dia, minha querida. The usual?
Camila nodded, fishing in her pocket for the few remaining reais.
Obrigada, Dona Maria. How are you today?
The old woman's eyes twinkled as she prepared the strong, sweet coffee.
You know me. Still breathing, still complaining.
She slid the steaming cup across the counter.
And you? Any luck with those fancy galleries?
Camila's smile faltered for a moment.
Not yet, but I'm not giving up.
Dona Maria clucked her tongue sympathetically.
Those fools don't know what they're missing. Your art, it speaks to the soul. One day, they'll see.
Camila sipped her coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest.
I hope so. I need someone to take a chance on me, you know?
The old woman's gaze softened.
It will come, minha querida. The right person will see your light.
With a grateful nod, Camila continued her journey up the winding streets. The weight of her bag seemed to grow heavier with each step, a physical reminder of the burden she carried, the dreams that refused to die, even as rejection after rejection piled up. She paused at her favorite spot, a small plaza overlooking the sprawling cityscape. The statue of Christ the Redeemer stood in the distance, arms outstretched as if embracing the chaos and beauty of Rio. Camila pulled out her sketchbook, her fingers itching to capture the play of light and shadow on the city below. As she sketched, the world around her faded away. The laughter of children playing in the plaza, the distant honking of car horns, the melodic strains of bossa nova drifting from an open window, all of it melted into a backdrop for the vision taking shape on her page. Hours slipped by unnoticed until the growling of her stomach forced Camila back to reality. She glanced at her watch and cursed softly. She was late for her shift at the tourist trap of a restaurant where she waited tables to make ends meet. As she hurried down the hill, her mind drifted to the tiny studio apartment waiting for her. Canvases crowded every available surface, each one a piece of her soul laid bare. Yet something was missing. Despite the riot of color surrounding her, despite the passion that drove her brush across canvas night after night, there was an emptiness she couldn't quite name. Camila shook her head, pushing the thought aside as she entered the garish restaurant. She plastered on a smile, ready to serve overpriced caipirinhas to sunburned tourists. But even as she moved through the motions of her job, her mind was elsewhere. On unfinished paintings, on dreams deferred, on the nagging feeling that there was something more waiting just beyond her reach. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of flame and gold, Camila couldn't help but wonder, was this all there was? Or was the universe preparing to answer the longing in her heart in ways she had yet to imagine? Chapter 2. The Collector's Prize. The sleek black Bentley glided through the bustling streets of Rio de Janeiro, a stark contrast to the colorful chaos surrounding it. Inside, Maxim Volkov's steel-gray eyes scanned the city beyond the tinted windows, his expression as impenetrable as a Siberian winter.
The auction house is just ahead, Mr. Volkov.
Sergei Mikhailov said, his voice tinged with a hint of nervousness.
Are you certain about this piece? The price?
Maxim's gaze snapped to his art dealer, silencing him mid-sentence.
The price is irrelevant, Sergei. What matters is authenticity.
Sergei nodded, swallowing hard.
Of course. The provenance checks out, but
Nothing.
Maxim cut in, his Russian accent thickening with irritation.
I didn't fly halfway across the world to second-guess myself. The Guardi will be mine.
As the car pulled up to a stately colonial building, Maxim adjusted his immaculate tailored suit. He stepped out into the sweltering heat, barely noticing the way passers-by stared at his imposing figure. Inside the auction house, a hush fell over the crowd as Maxim entered. He felt the weight of their gazes, some curious, some envious, some openly hostile. It was a familiar sensation, one he had long since learned to ignore. Sergei hurried to keep up as Maxim strode purposefully towards a painting hung in a place of honor. There it was, Francesco Guardi's Venetian Capriccio, a masterpiece of 18th century Vedute painting. Maxim's breath caught in his throat as he studied the delicate brushstrokes, the play of light on water, the impossible beauty captured on canvas.
It's exquisite,
He murmured, more to himself than to Sergei.
Indeed, Mr. Volkov.
A silky voice interjected. Maxim turned to see a woman in her 50s, exuding an air of cultured refinement.
I'm Isabella Montero, head curator. It's an honor to have you here.
Maxim inclined his head slightly.
The honor is mine, Ms. Montero. Your reputation precedes you.
As Isabella launched into a detailed history of the painting, Maxim found his attention drifting. His gaze swept the room, taking in the other potential buyers. A Saudi prince, flanked by bodyguards, an American tech billionaire, trying too hard to look casual, a Chinese businesswoman, her face an expressionless mask, competitors, obstacles. Maxim's jaw tightened. He had not come this far to leave empty-handed. The auction began, a flurry of raised paddles and escalating bids. Maxim remained still, his expression betraying nothing as the price climbed higher and higher. Sergei fidgeted beside him, beads of sweat forming on his brow. When the bidding reached 15 million euros, the room grew quiet. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air.
Going once?
Maxim raised his paddle.
20 million.
A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The auctioneer blinked, momentarily thrown off balance.
20 million euros from Mr. Volkov. Do I hear 21?
Silence.
Going once? Going twice? Sold.
A smattering of applause broke out as Maxim rose to his feet. He felt a familiar surge of satisfaction, the thrill of victory coursing through his veins. And yet, as he approached the painting, his painting now, Maxim felt a strange hollowness beneath the triumph. He stared into the depths of Guardi's masterpiece, searching for something he couldn't quite name.
Congratulations, Mr. Volkov.
Isabella said, appearing at his side.
This piece will make a stunning addition to your collection.
Maxim nodded, his eyes still fixed on the canvas.
Yes,
He murmured.
another piece of beauty captured and contained.
For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine the painting hanging in his vast, empty mansion in Moscow. Another treasure, another testament to his wealth and taste. And yet, as he stood there in the warm Brazilian afternoon, surrounded by the vibrant energy of Rio, Maxim couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something vital. He shook his head, banishing the thought.
Sergei,
He called, his voice sharp.
make the arrangements. I want the painting shipped to Moscow immediately.
As Sergei scurried off to handle the details, Maxim took one last look at his prize. The sunlight streaming through the windows caught the gold frame, making it gleam like a promise. Or perhaps, he thought with a wry smile, like a challenge. Chapter 3. A Twist of Fate. The Cantina Carioca buzzed with the usual late-afternoon crowd, tourists seeking refuge from the heat, locals catching up over cold beers. Camila glanced at the clock, a spark of excitement igniting in her chest. Just 15 more minutes, and she'd be free to dash off to her art class. Her portfolio, stuffed with her latest works, waited behind the bar. Tonight was critique night, and despite her nerves, Camila couldn't wait to get feedback on her new series.
almost there.
Julio, her coworker, said with a wink as he passed.
Big plans tonight?
Camila nodded, unable to keep the smile from her face.
Art class. I think I finally nailed that perspective technique we've been working on.
That's my girl.
Julio grinned.
You'll be famous one day, mark my words.
Camila rolled her eyes, but her smile widened. Julio's unwavering support had been a lifeline on her toughest days. As the minute hand ticked closer to freedom, Camila began her end-of-shift routine. She'd just retrieved her portfolio from behind the bar when Julio's voice cut through the din.
Cammy, wait!
He gestured frantically from across the room.
2 businessmen just came in. Table 12. Probably want caipirinhas. Can you take them before you go?
Camila bit back a sigh. So close. But bills needed paying, and every tip counted.
Sure thing.
She called back, tucking her portfolio under her arm. No time to stash it away again. As she turned towards table 12, her eyes landed on the newcomers, and her breath caught. The men stood out like jaguars in a flock of parrots. Crisp suits, serious expressions, exuding an aura of wealth and power that seemed at odds with the laid-back cantina. The taller of the 2 men scanned the room, his steel-gray eyes sharp and assessing. For a moment, they locked with Camila's, and she felt a jolt of something. Recognition? Curiosity? Before she could process it, he looked away, following his companion to a table in the corner. Camila shook her head, trying to focus. Just another customer, she told herself, nothing more. Get through this, and then it's off to class. As she approached their table, portfolio tucked under her arm, she overheard snippets of their conversation.
But need to be more careful, Sergey. That painting is irreplaceable.
Of course, Mr. Volkov. I assure you it's perfectly safe in this portfolio.
Camila's steps faltered. Volkov? The name tickled something in her memory. Wasn't there a famous art collector? Lost in thought, she didn't notice Sergey rising from his seat until it was too late. They collided, a tangle of limbs and startled exclamations. Camila's portfolio went flying, as did the one Sergey had been clutching.
I'm so sorry.
Camila gasped, scrambling to gather the scattered papers.
Are you all right?
Sergey muttered something in what sounded like Russian, snatching up the nearest portfolio.
Fine,
He said brusquely.
Just watch where you're going next time.
With that, he hurried off, presumably to the restroom. Camila gathered the remaining portfolio, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Great. Just great. As if she needed to give her boss another reason to fire her. It wasn't until she returned to the bar that she noticed something odd. The portfolio in her hands wasn't her battered old one. This was sleek, expensive leather with the monogram MV embossed in gold. Her stomach dropped. MV. Maxim Volkov. The painting. Oh no. Oh no. Camila's mind raced. She had to switch them back before anyone noticed. But how? She glanced at the corner table where the gray-eyed man, Volkov, sat alone perusing the menu. Taking a deep breath, Camila smoothed her apron and approached the table, the monogrammed portfolio hidden behind her back.
Good afternoon, sir. Are you ready to order?
Volkov looked up, and Camila felt that same jolt as before. Up close, his eyes were even more striking, the color of a storm-tossed sea.
Just a mineral water for now,
He said, his accent sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. Camila nodded, her heart pounding.
Of course, right away.
As she turned to leave, she accidentally bumped the table, causing Volkov's menu to fall.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She exclaimed, bending down to retrieve it. This was her chance. She reached for her old portfolio, which was sitting next to Volkov's chair. Just as her fingers grazed the worn leather, Volkov shifted in his seat, his leg blocking her access.
Allow me.
He said smoothly, picking up the menu himself. Their eyes met, and Camila could have sworn she saw a flicker of amusement in those gray depths.
Thank you.
She stammered, straightening up.
I'll be right back with your water.
Camila retreated to the bar, her cheeks burning. Smooth, Santos. Real smooth. But she couldn't give up. The longer she held on to that expensive portfolio, the more likely someone would notice. She had to try again. Grabbing a glass of water, she made her way back to Volkov's table. This time, she had a plan. As she approached, she pretended to trip, allowing some water to splash onto the table, and conveniently close to where her portfolio sat.
Oh, no.
She gasped, grabbing a napkin.
I'm so sorry, sir. Let me clean that up right away.
As she dabbed at the spill, she inched closer to the portfolios, just a little further. In her determination to reach the portfolios, Camila didn't notice how precariously she was balanced. Her fingers had just closed around the handle of her old portfolio when she lost her footing entirely. Time seemed to slow as she fell, her eyes widening in horror. The world tilted, and suddenly she found herself sprawled across Maxim Volkov's lap, her face mere inches from his. For a moment, the world stood still. Camila found herself staring into those storm-gray eyes, close enough to see flecks of blue within them. She felt the solid warmth of his chest, smelled a hint of expensive cologne. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure he must hear it.
I'm so sorry.
She stammered, heat flooding her cheeks.
I didn't mean to.
It's quite all right.
Volkov said, his voice a low rumble that she felt as much as heard. There was definitely amusement in his tone now.
Though I usually prefer to know a woman's name before we get quite this intimate.
Camila scrambled to her feet, mortification warring with a completely inappropriate urge to laugh.
Camila.
She managed.
Camila Santos. And you're Maxim Volkov.
One elegant eyebrow arched.
You seem to have me at a disadvantage, Miss Santos. Although I must say, your service here is rather hands-on.
Before Camila could respond, Sergei returned, his eyes widening at the scene before him.
Mr. Volkov, is everything all right?
Maxim's lips quirked in what was definitely a smile now.
Perfectly fine, Sergei. Miss Santos was just demonstrating the local hospitality.
He reached for the portfolio on the table, then paused, looking at Camila with a glint in his eye.
Though I believe this one might belong to you, Camila.
He held up her battered portfolio, his long fingers tracing the worn edges. Camilla's heart leapt into her throat.
Yes, that's mine. I can explain.
But Maxim wasn't listening. His eyes had narrowed, focusing on something peeking out from the portfolio's edge.
What's this?
He murmured, more to himself than to her. Before Camila could stop him, Maxim had flipped open the portfolio. Her protest died on her lips as she watched his expression change. The amusement in his eyes gave way to something else. Surprise, then intense concentration.
These are...
Maxim trailed off, his fingers hovering reverently over her sketches. He flipped through the pages, each turn revealing a new piece of Camilla's soul laid bare on paper. Camila held her breath. She'd never seen anyone look at her art quite like this before. Maxim Volkov, renowned art collector, was studying her work as if it were a priceless masterpiece. Finally, he looked up, his storm-gray eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her shiver.
Miss Santos,
He said, his voice low and serious.
These are extraordinary.
Camila blinked, sure she had misheard.
What?
Your use of color, the emotion in every stroke.
Maxim shook his head as if clearing it.
Who represents you? I'd very much like to speak with your gallery.
A bitter laugh escaped Camilla's lips before she could stop it.
My gallery? The only gallery showing my work is the wall of my tiny apartment.
Maxim's brow furrowed.
That's impossible. Work of this caliber.
He broke off, studying her face.
You're serious.
Camila nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The way Maxim was looking at her, not just at her body, but really seeing her, made her feel more exposed than any state of undress ever could. Maxim stood, closing the portfolio with a reverence that made Camilla's heart ache. He handed it back to her, their fingers brushing. That same electric jolt passed between them, but this time, neither pulled away.
Camila Santos,
Maxim said, his accent caressing her name in a way that made her knees weak.
I think we have a great deal to discuss. Perhaps over dinner?
Camilla's jaw dropped.
Dinner? With you? But I'm just a...
An incredibly talented artist who has been woefully overlooked.
Maxim finished for her. His lips curved into a smile that transformed his entire face, making him look younger, almost boyish.
And I, as it happens, am in a position to remedy that oversight. If you're willing, of course.
Camila clutched her portfolio to her chest, her mind whirling. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. And yet,
Yes,
she heard herself say, as if from a great distance.
I'd like that.
Maxim's smile widened, and Camila felt as though the sun had just broken through a lifetime of clouds.
Excellent. I'll make the arrangements. And Camila,
Yes?
try not to fall for any other art collectors between now and then. I'd hate to have competition.
As Camila watched Maxim leave, her heart pounding and her skin tingling where he had touched her, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a dramatic turn. For better or worse remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. She'd never look at a portfolio the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, someone was finally seeing her the way she'd always longed to be seen. Chapter 4. An Artistic Rendezvous. Camila stood before her closet, a tornado of fabric surrounding her. Dresses, blouses, and skirts lay strewn across every surface of her tiny apartment. She held up a simple black dress, then tossed it aside with a groan.
It's just dinner.
She muttered to herself, picking up a flowing sundress.
With a world-famous art collector who's seen your work and might change your life. No pressure.
Her phone buzzed and she nearly jumped out of her skin. A text from an unknown number.
Looking forward to our dinner. Don't forget to bring your portfolio and perhaps some band-aids, just in case. Maxim.
Camila couldn't help but laugh, even as her cheeks flushed at the memory of their first encounter. At least he had a sense of humor about it. An hour later, Camila found herself at one of Rio's most exclusive restaurants, clutching her portfolio like a lifeline. Maxim rose as she approached, and for a moment, Camila forgot how to breathe. He looked even more handsome in the soft lighting, his tailored suit accentuating his broad shoulders.
Miss Santos,
He said, his accent wrapping around her name like silk.
I'm glad you could make it. Without incident, I see.
Camila felt her lips twitch.
The night is young, Mr. Volkov. I haven't tripped over anything yet.
A ghost of a smile played on Maxim's lips as he held out her chair. As Camila sat, she noticed a small box on the table.
A gift.
Maxim explained, pushing it towards her.
Open it.
Curious, Camila lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a delicate silver bracelet, and dangling from it,
Is that a tiny fire extinguisher?
Camila asked, torn between laughter and disbelief. Maxim's eyes twinkled with mischief.
I thought it prudent, given your penchant for creating sparks.
Camila couldn't help it. She burst out laughing.
You're terrible.
She managed between giggles.
So I've been told,
Maxim replied, but his smile was warm.
though I prefer to think of myself as prepared.
Oh? And what else are you prepared for, Mr. Volkov?
Camila asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Maxim leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper.
Well, I did consider bringing a helmet, but I thought it might clash with your outfit.
Are you implying I'm dangerous, sir?
Absolutely.
Maxim nodded solemnly.
To furniture, glassware, and unsuspecting art collectors everywhere.
Their laughter mingled, drawing curious glances from nearby diners. As it subsided, Maxim's expression softened.
In all seriousness, Camila, I'm glad you came tonight. Your work, it's truly exceptional.
Camila felt a blush creeping up her cheeks.
Thank you, though I'm still half convinced this is an elaborate prank. Famous art collector discovers waitress's hidden talent? It sounds like a bad Hallmark movie.
But in those movies, isn't the art collector usually a secret prince as well?
Maxim raised an eyebrow.
Don't tell me.
Camila began, eyes widening in mock surprise.
Alas, just a humble Russian oligarch.
Maxim sighed dramatically.
Though I've been told I have a royal wave.
He demonstrated with a flick of his wrist, nearly knocking over his water glass in the process. It was Camilla's turn to rescue the teetering glass.
My, Mr. Volkov. And here I thought I was the clumsy one.
What can I say? You're rubbing off on me already.
As they perused the menu, Maxim pointed to an elaborate dish.
Have you tried the feijoada here? It's excellent.
On a waitress's salary? I'm lucky if I can afford the breadbasket.
But as a starving artist, isn't suffering for your art part of the job description?
Oh, yes.
Camila nodded sagely.
I suffer through ramen noodles nightly. It's very avant-garde.
Maxim chuckled.
Well, consider this meal part of your artistic education. Now tell me about your work. What inspires you?
Camilla's eyes lit up.
Everything, really. The way light hits the favelas at sunset, the rhythm of samba in the streets. It's like finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Taking something everyone sees every day and showing them the magic hidden inside.
Like turning a clumsy encounter into a charming dinner date?
Maxim suggested, his eyes twinkling. Camila felt her cheeks warm.
Exactly. Though I'm not sure how charming it is to assault a man with his own painting.
On the contrary,
Maxim leaned forward, his gaze intense.
I found it quite striking.
Their eyes met, and for a moment, the rest of the restaurant faded away. Camila felt a pull towards him, an undeniable connection that both thrilled and terrified her.
So,
She said, breaking the spell before she did something foolish like lean across the table and kiss him.
tell me about your collection. Any secret masterpieces hidden away?
Maxim's eyes glinted with amusement.
Now, Miss Santos. A gentleman never reveals all his secrets on the first date.
Oh, so this is a date then?
Camila teased, enjoying the way Maxim's composure slipped for just a moment. He recovered quickly, a smirk playing on his lips.
That depends. Are you planning on spilling anything on me tonight?
I'll do my best to restrain myself,
Camila promised solemnly.
though I make no guarantees about the tiramisu.
Their banter continued through the meal, punctuated by passionate discussions about art techniques, favorite painters, and the merits of various artistic movements. Camila found herself gesturing animatedly as she defended the use of bold colors in modern art, while Maxim argued for the subtle power of classical techniques.
But don't you see?
Camila insisted, waving her fork for emphasis.
It's about emotion, raw and unfiltered. Sometimes you need to scream in color to make people feel.
And sometimes,
Maxim countered, leaning in.
the softest whisper can shake the soul.
Their gazes locked, and suddenly Camila was acutely aware of how close they were, how intimate this conversation had become. She cleared her throat, reaching for her water glass to break the tension. Naturally, this was the moment her elbow decided to betray her, knocking the glass directly into Maxim's lap.
Oh no,
Camila gasped, mortified.
I'm so sorry, I can't believe I...
But Maxim was laughing, a rich, genuine sound that made Camila's heart skip.
I suppose I should have gotten you a bracelet with a caution, wet floor sign instead.
He chuckled, dabbing at his trousers with a napkin.
At least it wasn't the tiramisu.
Camila offered weakly, helping to mop up the spill. Their hands brushed, and Camila felt that now familiar jolt of electricity. Maxim's laughter faded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a brief moment, Maxim's carefully constructed facade slipped. Camila saw a flash of vulnerability in his eyes, a hint of longing that mirrored her own. But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by his usual composed expression.
Well,
Maxim said, his voice slightly husky.
I think that's our cue to call it a night. May I walk you home?
Camila nodded, suddenly aware of the lateness of the hour and the complexity of their situation. As they strolled through the warm Rio night, their conversation turned to safer topics. Upcoming exhibitions, the local art scene, Camila's next series. At her door, they paused, the air thick with unspoken words.
Camila,
Maxim began, then hesitated.
I'd like to help you. Your talent deserves to be seen, but I want you to know that my interest in your work is entirely professional. I wouldn't want to complicate things.
Camila felt a pang in her chest, even as she nodded in agreement.
Of course, professional. That's perfect.
For a moment, neither moved. Then Maxim took her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles.
Good night, Miss Santos. I look forward to seeing more of your work.
As Camila watched him walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had just slipped through her fingers. She touched the tiny fire extinguisher charm on her new bracelet and smiled ruefully. Maybe, she thought, they both needed a little protection. Not from physical mishaps, but from the dangerous territory their hearts were venturing into. Chapter 5. Worlds Apart. The morning after their dinner, Camila woke with a smile on her face, fingers unconsciously tracing the tiny fire extinguisher charm on her new bracelet. For a moment, she allowed herself to bask in the warmth of possibility, of connection, of being truly seen. Then reality came crashing down, as it always did. Her phone buzzed with a message from Julio.
Where are you? Boss is on a rampage.
Camila's heart sank as she glanced at the clock. She'd overslept, lost in dreams of storm-gray eyes and passionate discussions about art. Now she was an hour late for her shift at the cantina. As she raced through the streets of Rio, hair still damp from a hasty shower, Camila couldn't shake the feeling that she was running in two directions at once, towards a future bright with promise and away from the only life she'd ever known. The cantina was in chaos when she arrived, Julio juggling 3 tables at once while their boss, Senor Oliveira, barked orders from behind the bar.
Santos,
He bellowed as soon as he spotted her.
my office now.
Camila's stomach churned as she followed him, shooting an apologetic glance at Julio. She knew what was coming. She'd been late too many times, always with the same excuse. Her art class, a gallery submission, a burst of inspiration she couldn't ignore. Senor Oliveira's face was thunderous as he closed the office door.
This is the last straw, Camila. I've been patient, but I can't run a business with unreliable staff.
I'm sorry, senor. It won't happen again. I promise.
He held up a hand, silencing her.
No more promises, no more chances. You're a good kid, Camila, but your head's always in the clouds. This job requires both feet on the ground.
The words hit her like a physical blow.
Are you firing me?
His expression softened slightly.
Consider it a push in the right direction. You've got talent, kid, but you'll never make it as an artist if you're always playing it safe. Sometimes you have to leap without a net.
Camila stumbled out of the cantina in a daze, clutching her apron. The busy street suddenly felt alien, hostile. How would she pay her rent? Buy supplies? She'd been scraping by on tips and dreams, and now even that meager safety net was gone. Her phone buzzed again. Maxim.
Good morning, Camila. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I've spoken to a friend who runs a gallery in New York. He's very interested in your work. Would you be available to discuss this over coffee?
Camila stared at the message, her vision blurring with unshed tears. New York. A real gallery. Everything she'd ever dreamed of. Handed to her on a silver platter. And yet, her finger hovered over the reply button, trembling slightly. This was her chance, wasn't it? To leap without a net, just as Senor Oliveira had said. To grab hold of her dreams with both hands and never let go. But New York was a world away from the vibrant streets of Rio, from the only home she'd ever known. From her struggling artist friends, from Julio's unwavering support, from the very essence of who she was as an artist. And from Maxim. The thought hit her with unexpected force. Maxim, with his storm-gray eyes and hidden depths. Maxim, who saw the fire in her art when everyone else saw only scribbles. Maxim, who made her feel seen, understood, alive in a way she'd never experienced before. Maxim, who lived in a world of private jets and million-dollar paintings, while she could barely afford bus fare. Camila sank onto a nearby bench, the reality of their situation crashing over her. What had she been thinking? That a wealthy, sophisticated art collector would want anything more than a fleeting dalliance with a struggling artist from the favelas? That she could ever truly fit into his world of galas and auctions and champagne receptions? Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Maxim.
I understand if this is too much, too soon. Please know that my offer of support comes with no strings attached. Your talent deserves to be seen. Camila, the world deserves to see it.
A lump formed in Camila's throat. His words were kind, generous even. But all she could hear was the vast chasm between their worlds, a gulf too wide for even the strongest bridge of passion to span. With shaking fingers, she typed out a reply.
Thank you for the opportunity, Maxim, but I can't leave Rio. My life, my inspiration, everything that makes me who I am as an artist, it's all here. I'm sorry.
She hit send before she could change her mind, then turned off her phone. Tears streamed down her face as she stared out at the bustling street, at the vibrant life of Rio that flowed around her. She'd made the right choice, hadn't she? Staying true to herself, to her roots, even if it meant giving up the chance of a lifetime. Even if it meant saying goodbye to the first man who'd ever truly understood her soul. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the city in hues of gold and rose, Camila sat alone on her bench. She'd lost her job, turned down a life-changing opportunity, and quite possibly broken her own heart in the process. Chapter 6. Canvas of Compromise. The sun was setting over Copacabana Beach, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink that would have taken Camila's breath away on any other day. But as she sat on the warm sand, knees pulled to her chest, she could only stare unseeing at the horizon. 3 days had passed since she'd turned down Maxim's offer. 3 days of silence, of second-guessing, of trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Her phone lay silent beside her, a constant reminder of the opportunity she'd let slip away.
You know,
A familiar voice said from behind her.
I'm beginning to think you have a flair for the dramatic. First falling into my lap, now brooding on a beach at sunset. Very artistic.
Camila's heart leapt into her throat as she whirled around. Maxim stood there, looking somewhat out of place in his tailored slacks and crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows in a concession to the beach setting.
Maxim?
She gasped.
What are you? How did you find me?
He smiled, a touch of sheepishness in his expression.
I may have bribed Julio with promises of connections in the music industry. He's quite protective of you, by the way.
Camila couldn't help but laugh, even as her eyes filled with tears.
He's a good friend.
Maxim's expression softened.
May I?
He asked, gesturing to the sand beside her. She nodded, and he lowered himself down, his usual grace somewhat hampered by the unfamiliar terrain. For a moment, they sat in silence, watching the waves crash against the shore.
I owe you an apology.
Maxim said finally, his voice low and serious.
I was presumptuous in my offer. I should have considered what it would mean for you to leave Rio.
Camila turned to look at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his eyes.
You were trying to help.
She said softly.
I'm the one who should apologize. I shut you out without explanation.
No, you were right to prioritize your artistic integrity. It's what drew me to your work in the first place, that raw, uncompromising passion.
He paused, a small smile playing on his lips.
It's what draws me to you, if I'm being honest.
Camila felt her cheeks warm, her heart racing.
Maxim,
He held up a hand, cutting her off gently.
Before you say anything, I have a proposition for you. A compromise, if you will.
Intrigued, Camila nodded for him to continue.
I've spoken to a friend who runs a gallery here in Rio.
Maxim said, his eyes never leaving hers.
It's not as prestigious as New York, but it's well respected in the local art scene. They're interested in featuring your work in an upcoming exhibition of emerging Brazilian artists.
are you serious?
Maxim nodded, a hint of his usual smirk returning.
Deadly serious. Though I warn you, the owner is quite demanding. She insists on meeting the artist in person before making any final decisions.
She?
Camila asked, a hint of irrational jealousy coloring her tone.
Mariana Duarte, 73 years old, with a tongue sharp enough to flay even the most arrogant of artists. I think you'll like her.
Camila laughed, feeling a weight lift from her chest.
Maxim, I don't know what to say.
Say you'll meet with her.
Maxim said, his expression growing serious again.
Say you'll give this a chance. Your talent deserves to be seen, Camila, even if it's not on the international stage yet.
The way he said yet, with such certainty, made Camilla's breath catch. She stared at him, this enigmatic man who had crashed into her life and turned everything upside down. Who challenged her, inspired her, saw her in a way no one else ever had.
Why are you doing this?
She asked softly.
You barely know me.
Maxim was quiet for a moment, his gaze turning to the horizon.
I've spent my life surrounded by art,
He said finally.
beautiful pieces locked away in climate-controlled vaults, traded like commodities. But your work, it's alive, Camila. It breathes. It pulses with the heartbeat of this city. When I look at your paintings, I see the world through your eyes, and it's extraordinary.
He turned back to her, and the intensity in his eyes made Camilla's heart skip.
I want to see more of that world. I want to understand it, to be a part of it, to be a part of your journey as an artist in whatever way you'll allow.
Camila felt tears prick her eyes.
And what if I want you to be a part of more than just my artistic journey?
Maxim's breath hitched, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face.
I would like that, very much. But Camila, my world is complicated. There are expectations, obligations, things I'm not proud of, things I can't easily walk away from.
And my world is simple?
Camila challenged, gesturing to the favelas visible in the distance.
Maxim, I'm a struggling artist from a world you've probably only seen in documentaries. How could we possibly?
We'll figure it out.
Maxim interrupted, reaching out to take her hand.
If you're willing to try, so am I.
Camila looked down at their intertwined fingers, marveling at how right it felt.
It won't be easy.
She warned. Maxim chuckled.
My dear, nothing worthwhile ever is. But I think you and I could create something beautiful together. In art and perhaps in life.
As the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, Camila leaned her head on Maxim's shoulder. She didn't know what the future held, what challenges they would face. But for the first time in days, she felt hope blooming in her chest.
Okay,
She said softly.
let's create something beautiful.
Maxim's arm wrapped around her, pulling her close. As they sat there, watching the stars emerge over the Atlantic, Camila realized that sometimes the most exquisite masterpieces were painted not on canvas, but on the delicate, complex landscape of the human heart. Chapter 7. Brushstrokes of Doubt. The gallery was a converted warehouse in the artistic heart of Santa Teresa, its white walls a stark contrast to the vibrant street art outside. Camila stood before it, her portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. She glanced down at the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist, the tiny fire extinguisher charm catching the morning light.
You can do this,
She murmured to herself, echoing Maxim's words from the night before. But as she reached for the door, her hand trembled. Inside, the cool air hit her like a wave, carrying the faint scent of paint and possibility. Mariana Duarte stood in the center of the room, a diminutive figure with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing.
So,
Mariana said, her voice sharp as a knife.
you're the girl Maxim's been raving about. Let's see if you live up to the hype, shall we?
Camila swallowed hard, forcing a smile.
It's an honor to meet you, Señora Duarte.
Save the pleasantries.
Mariana interrupted, gesturing impatiently.
Show me your work. And don't expect me to go easy on you just because you've charmed our resident Russian art prince.
Heat flooded Camilla's cheeks as she fumbled with her portfolio. As she laid out her pieces, she couldn't help but think of that first night in the cantina, of Maxim's eyes widening as he looked at her art. The memory gave her strength, even as doubt gnawed at her insides. Mariana circled the displayed works like a shark, her expression unreadable.
Interesting use of color.
She murmured, pausing before a vibrant cityscape.
Bold. Almost aggressive. You're angry about something, aren't you, girl?
Camila blinked, taken aback.
I wouldn't say angry exactly.
No?
Mariana's eyebrow arched.
Then what would you call this?
She gestured to an abstract piece, all jagged lines and clashing hues.
It's complicated.
Camila admitted, her fingers unconsciously tracing the fire extinguisher charm.
Life in the favelas, it's not easy, but there's beauty there too, and hope. I try to capture both.
Mariana's eyes narrowed, following the movement of Camilla's hand.
I see Maxim's been giving out his little trinkets again. Tell me, does he still use those ridiculous metaphors? You've set my world on fire, perhaps. Or your art is a blaze of passion.
Camila felt as though she'd been doused in ice water.
What?
Oh, don't look so shocked.
Mariana waved a hand dismissively.
Maxim's always had a soft spot for talented young artists. It's sweet, really. Until he gets bored and moves on to the next shiny object.
The words hit Camila like a physical blow. She stumbled back, bumping into a pedestal. A small sculpture wobbled precariously.
Careful!
Mariana snapped, steadying the piece.
This isn't some back alley cantina, girl. You can't go falling all over the place here.
Camila flinched at the reference. Memories of that first night with Maxim flooding back. Had it all been just a game to him? A way to discover new talent, to play the magnanimous patron?
I'm sorry.
She mumbled, gathering her paintings with shaking hands.
I should go. This was a mistake.
Mariana's expression softened, just a fraction.
Now, hold on. I didn't say your work wasn't good. In fact, it's quite promising. Raw, certainly, but there's real passion here.
Camila paused, torn between hope and suspicion.
But you said...
I said Maxim has a history of getting overexcited about new artists.
Mariana corrected.
I didn't say anything about your talent. That stands on its own merits.
She moved to a painting Camila had almost forgotten was in her portfolio. It was different from the others. Softer, more introspective. A quiet moment in a chaotic world.
This one?
Mariana said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle.
Tell me about this one.
Camila approached hesitantly.
It's the view from my window, early morning, just before the city wakes up, when everything is still possible.
Mariana nodded, a small smile playing on her lips.
This is the one, you know. This is what sets you apart. Not the anger or the bold statements. This quiet hope. This ability to find beauty in the ordinary. That's your true gift.
Camila stared at the painting, seeing it with new eyes.
I didn't think. I mean, it's so simple compared to the others.
Sometimes simplicity is the hardest thing to achieve.
Mariana said.
You have real talent, Camila. But talent isn't enough. You need to decide what kind of artist you want to be. What kind of person you want to be.
The older woman's gaze was piercing, as if she could see right through to Camila's soul.
Are you going to let your fears define you? Or are you going to push past them and create something truly extraordinary?
Camilla opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: hope, doubt, fear, determination.
I don't expect an answer now.
Mariana said, her brisk tone returning.
Take some time. Think about what I've said. And when you're ready, really ready, come back and we'll talk about that exhibition.
As Camilla left the gallery, her head spinning and her heart racing, she nearly collided with a familiar figure.
Camila?
Maxim's voice was concerned.
How did it go? Are you all right?
She looked up at him, at the warmth in his storm-gray eyes, and felt her chest tighten. How could she reconcile the man before her with Mariana's warnings? How could she trust her heart when her mind was screaming at her to run?
I need some time
She managed, stepping back.
to think about everything.
Hurt flashed across Maxim's face, quickly masked.
Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk.
As Camilla walked away, her portfolio heavy in her arms, she felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice. Behind her lay the safety of the known, the comfortable familiarity of her struggles and dreams. Before her stretched a vast unknown, filled with possibility and peril in equal measure. The tiny fire extinguisher swung from her wrist, a constant reminder of the spark that had started it all. But was that spark strong enough to light her way forward? Or would it consume her, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake? Chapter 8. Canvas of Desire. The Duarte Gallery hummed with anticipation. Mariana's Emerging Voices of Brazil exhibition had drawn a diverse crowd. Local art enthusiasts, curious tourists, and a smattering of international collectors. Camilla stood before her displayed works, a vision in a deep blue dress that matched the hues in her Cityscape series. Her fingers absently traced the tiny fire extinguisher charm on her bracelet as her eyes scanned the room. She told herself she wasn't looking for anyone in particular, but her heart quickened every time the door opened.
Stop fidgeting.
Mariana's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. The older woman appeared at her elbow, resplendent in a black pantsuit.
You look like you're about to bolt. Remember, you earned your place here.
Camilla took a deep breath, forcing a smile.
Thank you, Senora Duarte. I'm just a little overwhelmed.
Mariana's eyes softened a fraction.
Understandable, but chin up, girl. The vultures are circling.
She nodded towards a group of well-dressed patrons heading their way.
Time to shine.
As Camilla launched into her practiced spiel about her artistic process, she felt a familiar prickle on the back of her neck. She turned, her words faltering as she met a pair of storm-gray eyes across the room. Maxim stood by her Morning Possibilities painting, the quiet, hopeful piece that had caught Mariana's eye. He was the picture of elegance in a perfectly tailored suit, but there was something different about him. A tension in his shoulders, the intensity in his gaze that made Camilla's breath catch.
Excuse me.
She murmured to the patrons, barely registering their nods as she made her way across the room.
You came?
She said softly as she reached Maxim's side. He turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
For a moment they stood in silence, both pretending to study the painting before them.
It's even more beautiful than I remembered.
Maxim said finally, his voice low.
There's a vulnerability here, a raw honesty that's captivating.
Camilla felt heat rise to her cheeks.
Thank you. I wasn't sure about including it, actually. It's so different from my other work.
Maxim's hand brushed against hers, sending a jolt of electricity up her arm.
Sometimes it's the pieces we're most unsure about that resonate the most deeply with others.
Their eyes met, and Camilla felt the world narrow to just the two of them. The noise of the gallery faded away, replaced by the thundering of her own heartbeat. The spell was broken by Mariana's voice, loud and deliberate.
Ah, Maxim, I see you found our rising star.
They stepped apart, Camilla suddenly aware of how close they'd been standing. Mariana's sharp eyes missed nothing as she joined them, a knowing smirk on her face.
Mariana,
Maxim nodded, his composure impeccable.
you've outdone yourself with this exhibition. The talent on display is remarkable.
Flattery will get you everywhere, darling.
Mariana drawled.
Now, make yourself useful and introduce Camilla to some of your collector friends. Girl needs to start building her network.
As Mariana swept away, Maxim offered Camilla his arm.
Shall we?
Maxim guided Camilla through the crowd, his hand a reassuring presence on the small of her back. Each introduction blended into the next, a kaleidoscope of faces and voices.
Camila, meet João Mendes. curator at the Museum of Modern Art in Sao Paulo.
Your use of color is extraordinary, Ms. Santos. How do you achieve such vibrancy?
Oh, it's all about layering.
Camila heard herself explain, surprised by her own confidence.
I start with a base of...
The scene shifted, and suddenly she was face to face with a stern-looking woman in horn-rimmed glasses.
Dr. Liza Thornton, art critic for The Guardian.
Maxim murmured in her ear.
Interesting technique.
Dr. Thornton mused, peering at Urban Symphony No. 3s.
Reminiscent of Rivera, but with a distinctly Brazilian flair. Tell me, Ms. Santos, what statement are you making about the socio-economic divide in Rio?
Camila blinked, momentarily thrown. Then she felt Maxim's hand, warm and steady on her back, and the words flowed.
It's less a statement and more an observation.
She began, gesturing to the canvas.
See how the favela here bleeds into the luxury high-rise? In Rio, these worlds are constantly colliding, influencing each other in ways we often overlook.
Another shift, another introduction.
Carlos Fuentes, up-and-coming gallerist from Buenos Aires.
Maxim said, a hint of pride in his voice.
Ms. Santos, your work is phenomenal.
Carlos gushed, his eyes bright with excitement.
Have you considered exhibiting internationally? I have contacts in...
Now, Carlos.
Maxim interjected smoothly, his tone light but with an undercurrent of... Was that possessiveness?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Camila's just beginning to make her mark here in Rio.
Their eyes met, and Camila felt a rush of warmth at the protectiveness in Maxim's gaze. The evening whirled on. A famous actor gushed over her use of perspective. A wealthy couple from New York debated the merits of her brushwork. A local street artist praised her ability to capture the soul of the city. Through it all, Maxim was a constant presence, guiding her, supporting her, his pride in her evident in every introduction. Camila found herself relaxing into the role of emerging artist, buoyed by his unwavering belief in her talent. As they paused for a moment between introductions, Maxim leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear.
You're a natural at this,
he murmured.
They're all falling in love with you.
Camila turned to him, a witty retort on her lips, but the intensity in his storm-gray eyes made the words die in her throat.
All of them?
She managed to whisper. Maxim's gaze softened, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on her waist.
Well,
he said, his voice low and intimate.
Perhaps one more than the others.
Before Camila could process the implications of that statement, they were swept into another conversation, another introduction. But the warmth of Maxim's words lingered, wrapping around her like a promise. It was during a rare moment alone that Camila overheard a snippet of conversation that made her blood run cold.
Waste of time. Volkov's just playing with another charity case. Remember that sculptor in Paris?
Camila's grip tightened on her champagne flute. She turned, searching for Maxim in the crowd, suddenly desperate to put some distance between them. She found him deep in conversation with an elegantly dressed older woman. As Camila approached, she caught the tail end of their exchange.
Sure about this, Maxim? After what happened in St. Petersburg?
Maxim's eyes flickered to Camila as she drew near. A flash of something. Guilt? Fear? Crossing his face before his usual mask of calm settled into place.
Camila,
he said warmly, perhaps a touch too brightly.
There's someone I'd like you to meet. This is Valentina Petrova, a dear friend and fellow collector.
Valentina's shrewd eyes assessed Camila.
So this is the artist you've been raving about. I must say, your work is interesting.
The way she said interesting made it clear it wasn't entirely a compliment. Camila forced a smile.
Thank you. I'm glad you find it provocative.
Valentina's eyebrows rose at Camila's pointed response. She turned to Maxim with a laugh.
Oh, I like this one. She's got fire.
You have no idea,
Maxim murmured, his eyes never leaving Camila's face. The intensity of his gaze made Camila's knees weak. She excused herself, suddenly desperate for air. On the gallery's small balcony, Camila gulped in the cool night air. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, elation at the success of the show, confusion over the overheard conversations, and an undeniable, terrifying attraction to Maxim that threatened to consume her.
Camila?
Maxim's voice was soft behind her.
Are you all right?
She turned, finding him closer than she expected. The moonlight cast shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp planes of his cheekbones.
I'm fine.
She lied.
Just needed some air.
Maxim stepped closer, concern evident in his eyes.
You're shivering.
Before she could protest, he had shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The weight of it, the warmth, the scent of his cologne. It was all too much.
Maxim,
She whispered, her resolve crumbling.
what are we doing?
He was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Then, slowly giving her every chance to pull away, he cupped her face in his hands.
Something terrifying.
He murmured.
Something wonderful.
Their lips met, and Camilla's world exploded into color. The kiss was everything she had imagined and nothing like she had expected. Tender yet passionate, familiar yet thrilling. She melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Camilla felt as though she were seeing clearly for the first time. The doubts and fears that had plagued her seemed to melt away, replaced by a heady mixture of hope and desire.
Camila,
Maxim began, his voice rough with emotion. The balcony door burst open, startling them apart. Mariana stood there, her eyes sparkling with triumph.
There you are. Camilla, darling, you need to come back inside. Nicholas Alvarez just arrived, and he's absolutely enamored with your Urban Symphony series. I think we might have our first major sale.
As Mariana ushered her back into the gallery, Camilla glanced back at Maxim. He stood alone on the balcony, silhouetted against the night sky, an unreadable expression on his face. In that moment, Camilla allowed herself to imagine a future. One where her art hung in galleries around the world, where she woke up each morning to storm-gray eyes and secret smiles. It was a beautiful dream. But as she was swept back into the whirlwind of the exhibition, doubt crept in. Was it a dream they could make real? Or would the morning light reveal it as just another beautiful illusion, destined to fade like so many others before it? Only time would tell. But for now, with the taste of Maxim's kiss still on her lips and the thrill of artistic recognition humming through her veins, Camilla chose to believe in the masterpiece they were creating together, one brushstroke at a time. Chapter 9. Shadows and Light. The morning after the gallery opening dawned bright and clear, but Camilla's mind was anything but. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, nursing a cup of strong coffee, her eyes fixed on the newspaper before her. A glowing review of Mariana's exhibition took up half a page, with a particular focus on the raw talent and evocative style of emerging artist Camila Santos. She should have been elated. Instead, a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. She opened it to find Julio, grinning from ear to ear and brandishing a bouquet of wildflowers.
Congratulations, superstar.
He crowed, sweeping her into a hug.
I told you you'd make it big one day.
Camila laughed despite herself, the familiar scent of Julio's cologne momentarily grounding her.
It's just one exhibition, Julio, hardly making it big.
Julio pulled back, his expression suddenly serious.
Hey, none of that. This is huge, Cammy. You should be celebrating.
She forced a smile, ushering him inside. As Julio chattered excitedly about the review, arranging the flowers in her chipped vase, Camilla's eyes drifted to the bracelet on her wrist. The tiny fire extinguisher charm caught the morning light, and suddenly she was back in that moment, falling into Maxim's lap, the shock in his storm-gray eyes, the electricity of that first touch.
Earth to Camila.
Julio's voice cut through her memory.
You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost.
Camila shook her head, trying to clear it.
I'm fine. Just processing everything, I guess.
Julio's eyes narrowed.
This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain Russian art collector, would it?
Heat flooded Camilla's cheeks.
What? No, Save it?
Julio interrupted, a knowing smirk on his face.
I saw the way he looked at you last night, like you were the only masterpiece in that whole gallery.
Camilla sank onto her worn sofa, suddenly feeling overwhelmed.
It's complicated, Julio.
Isn't it always?
He sat beside her, his voice softening.
Talk to me, Cammy. What's really going on?
She took a deep breath, trying to organize her swirling thoughts.
It's just, everything's happening so fast. The exhibition, the attention, Maxim. I feel like I'm losing myself, like I'm turning into someone I don't recognize.
What do you mean?
Camilla stood pacing the small room.
Last night, at the gallery, I was schmoozing with these art world elites, talking about perspective and socioeconomic commentary. Me, the girl who used to sell sketches on the beach for pocket change.
She paused at the window, looking out at the favela sprawling below.
What if success changes me? What if I lose touch with where I came from, with what makes my art real?
Julio was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was uncharacteristically serious.
Cammy, look at me.
She turned, meeting his earnest gaze.
You are the most talented, passionate, genuine person I know. Success isn't going to change that. It's just going to let more people see what I've always seen in you.
Camila felt tears prick her eyes.
But what about Maxim? He's from a completely different world. How can I be with someone like that without losing myself?
Julio stood, joining her at the window.
Maybe the question isn't how you can fit into his world, but how you can build a new world together. One that has room for both the favela and the fancy galleries.
As if on cue, Camila's phone buzzed. A message from Maxim.
Last night was incredible. You were incredible. Can we meet for coffee? There's something I need to tell you.
Camila's heart raced as she showed Julio the message. He whistled low.
Sounds serious. You gonna go?
She bit her lip, indecision warring within her.
I don't know. What if...
Another buzz interrupted her. This time it was an email from Mariana Duarte.
Girl, we need to talk. A collector from New York is interested in commissioning a series. Big opportunity. Come to the gallery ASAP.
Julio read the email over her shoulder, his eyes widening.
Cami, this is huge. You have to go.
Camila stared at her phone, feeling pulled in two directions. The New York Commission could be her big break, a chance to establish herself on the international art scene. But Maxim? The memory of their kiss on the balcony sent a shiver down her spine.
I need to think.
She muttered, sinking back onto the sofa. Julio sat beside her, his expression sympathetic.
Look, I know you're scared, but sometimes you have to take a risk to create something beautiful. Isn't that what you always say about your art?
Camila nodded slowly, her fingers absently tracing the fire extinguisher charm.
You're right. I don't want to lose myself in all of this. I don't want to become some sanitized version of myself that fits into the art world's expectations.
Then don't.
Julio said simply.
Be Camila Santos, the girl who paints with her whole heart. The girl who sees beauty in the chaos of the favelas. The girl who's brave enough to fall for a handsome Russian, even if it scares the hell out of her.
A laugh bubbled up in Camila's throat, surprising her.
When did you get so wise?
I've always been wise. You were just too busy painting to notice.
As Julio left, promising to check in later, Camila found herself standing before her easel. A blank canvas stared back at her, full of possibility and terror in equal measure. She picked up a brush, dipping it in deep, rich blue. As she made the first stroke, she thought of Maxim's eyes, of the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Another stroke, this time a vibrant orange that reminded her of the sunset over the favela. As she painted, pouring her confusion and hope and fear onto the canvas, Camila realized something. She didn't have to choose between her roots and her future, between her art and her heart. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to blend them all into something new, something uniquely her own. The question was, would Maxim be willing to be part of that messy, beautiful creation? Or would the weight of their differences, the pull of their separate worlds, prove too much to overcome? With a deep breath, Camila set down her brush and picked up her phone. It was time to find out. Chapter 10. Shattered Canvas. The Copacabana Palace Hotel loomed before Camila, its Art Deco facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. She clutched her portfolio tighter, feeling woefully out of place among the well-heeled tourists and business people streaming through the ornate doors. Mariana's words echoed in her mind. "This is your chance, girl. Don't mess it up." Taking a deep breath, Camila stepped into the cool, marble-lined lobby. She spotted Mariana immediately, deep in conversation with a tall, distinguished-looking man. As Camila approached, she caught snippets of their discussion.
Absolutely captivating work. Raw yet sophisticated.
The man was saying, his English tinged with a New York accent. Mariana beamed as she saw Camila.
Ah, here she is now. Camila, darling, meet George Harrington. He's the curator I told you about, from the Metropolis Gallery in New York.
Camila's stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she shook George's hand.
It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Harrington.
George's eyes lit up.
The honor is mine, Ms. Santos. Your Urban Symphony series has caused quite a stir in my circle. I'm very interested in commissioning a new series for our upcoming Emerging Voices exhibition.
As George outlined his vision for the commission, Camila felt a growing sense of unease. He spoke of gentrification, of the quaint charm of the favelas, of capturing the exotic energy of Rio.
We want something that will really shock our New York audience.
George said, his eyes gleaming.
Show them the gritty reality of life in the favelas, but with a touch of hope. Redemption, you know?
Camilla's throat tightened. Is that how they saw her work? As some kind of poverty porn? Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the lobby.
Camila,
She turned to see Maxim striding towards them, a look of surprise on his face. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, a stark contrast to her simple sundress.
Maxim, what are you doing here?
Camila asked, confusion and joy warring within her. His eyes flicked to George and Mariana before returning to her.
I had a meeting with a collector. I didn't realize you'd be here.
George cleared his throat.
Mr. Volkov, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't know you were acquainted with Ms. Santos.
Maxim's expression tightened almost imperceptibly.
We've crossed paths in the local art scene.
The casual dismissal stung more than Camilla expected. She turned back to George, forcing a smile.
You were saying about the commission.
As George launched back into his pitch, Camilla was acutely aware of Maxim's presence just behind her. She could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell the faint trace of his cologne.
Of course, we'd need you in New York for at least 6 months to complete the series.
George was saying,
All expenses paid naturally, and the exposure would be invaluable.
Camilla's mind reeled. 6 months in New York? Leave Rio? Leave everything she knew?
That's a very generous offer, Mr. Harrington.
She managed. George beamed.
Excellent. I'll have my assistant draw up the contracts. We'll need to move quickly to meet our deadline.
As George excused himself to make a call, Mariana gripped Camilla's arm.
Girl, this is it. Your ticket to the big leagues. Don't let anything hold you back.
Camilla nodded numbly, her eyes drifting to Maxim. He stood a few feet away, his face an unreadable mask.
Maxim,
She said softly, stepping towards him.
can we talk?
He nodded curtly, guiding her to a quiet corner of the lobby.
Congratulations.
He said, his voice carefully neutral.
New York is a big opportunity.
Camilla searched his face, looking for any hint of the warmth she'd seen at the gallery opening.
I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to talk to you first, about us.
Something flashed in Maxim's eyes. Pain? Fear? Before his mask slipped back into place.
There is no us, Camila. We're from different worlds. This opportunity proves that.
His words hit her like a physical blow.
But I thought, after the gallery,
Maxim's jaw tightened.
The gallery was a mistake. I let myself get carried away. But the reality is, you belong in New York, making a name for yourself. And I have obligations here that I can't walk away from.
Camilla felt tears pricking her eyes.
obligations? Maxim, what aren't you telling me?
He looked away, his shoulders tense.
It's complicated. There are aspects of my work, my life, that you wouldn't understand, that you shouldn't have to understand.
Anger flared in Camilla's chest, cutting through the hurt.
So that's it? You decide what I can and can't understand? What happened to seeing the real me, to valuing my perspective?
Maxim's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw a glimmer of the connection they'd shared. But then it was gone, replaced by cold determination.
I'm sorry, Camila. This is for the best. Take the New York offer. Become the artist I know you can be.
With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Camilla standing alone in the opulent lobby, feeling more lost and out of place than ever. She barely registered George's return, his excited chatter about contracts and timelines washing over her. All she could focus on was the growing chasm in her chest, the feeling that she was being torn in two. New York beckoned, offering fame, fortune, and artistic recognition. But at what cost? Would she be selling out, creating sanitized versions of her community's struggles for wealthy patrons to gawk at? And Maxim? Had it all been a lie? A fleeting fantasy born of champagne and moonlight? As she left the hotel, portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield, Camilla felt as though she were walking on quicksand. Every step threatened to pull her under, to drown her in doubt and fear and shattered dreams. The tiny fire extinguisher charm on her bracelet caught the fading sunlight, a bitter reminder of possibilities now burned to ash. Camilla unclasped the bracelet, letting it dangle from her fingers for a moment before dropping it into a nearby trash can. She had decisions to make, a future to shape. But in that moment, standing on the glittering sidewalks of Copacabana, Camila Santos had never felt more alone, more unsure of who she was or where she belonged. The canvas of her life, once so vividly painted with hope and possibility, now seemed a muddied mess of conflicting colors and broken lines. How could she possibly create beauty from such chaos? Only time would tell. But as the sun set over Rio, casting long shadows across the city she both loved and longed to escape, Camila couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what choice she made, something precious would be lost forever. Chapter 11. Fractured Reflections. The Sao Paulo International Airport buzzed with activity, a cacophony of languages and emotions swirling around Camila as she stood frozen before the departure board. Her flight to New York glowed in harsh yellow letters, a beacon of opportunity and escape. And yet, her feet refused to move. 2 weeks had passed since that fateful day at the Copacabana Palace. 2 weeks of sleepless nights, of paint-splattered canvases that never seemed to capture the turmoil in her heart. 2 weeks of silence from Maxim. Camila's hand went to her bare wrist, the absence of the charm bracelet a constant, aching reminder of what she'd lost. Or had she ever really had it to begin with?
Final boarding call for Flight 247 to New York.
The announcement crackled overhead, jolting Camila from her reverie. This was it. Her chance to become the artist she'd always dreamed of being. To prove to herself, to Maxim, to the world, that a girl from the favelas could make it big. So why did it feel like she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life? As if in answer, a familiar voice cut through the din.
Cammy, wait!
She turned to see Julio sprinting towards her, weaving through annoyed travelers, a newspaper clutched in his hand.
Julio, what are you doing here?
Camila asked, confusion and a spark of hope warring in her chest. Breathless, Julio thrust the newspaper at her.
You can't leave, not yet, look!
Camila's eyes widened as she took in the front page headline. Art World, rocked by forgery scandal. Prominent collector, Maxim Volkov, implicated. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Camila scanned the article. Accusations of a multi-million-dollar forgery ring. Maxim's name mentioned alongside known criminals. Whispers of flee to avoid prosecution.
This can't be true,
Camila murmured, her voice barely audible over the airport's bustle. Julio gripped her shoulders, his eyes intense.
Cammy, I know you care about him, but you need to ask yourself, did you ever really know him at all?
The question hit her like a physical blow. Memories flashed through her mind in rapid succession. Maxim's surprised expression when she fell into his lap at the cantina. His intense gaze as he looked at her art for the first time. The warmth of his hand on the small of her back at the gallery opening. The coldness in his eyes at the Copacabana Palace. Each memory seemed to shift and warp, taking on new, sinister meanings in light of the accusations. Had it all been an act? A way to gain her trust, to use her emerging talent as a cover for his illegal activities?
Final boarding call for passenger Santos, Camila.
The announcement blared, startling her back to the present. Julio squeezed her hand.
What are you going to do?
Camila stared at her boarding pass, then back at the newspaper. New York suddenly felt like a coward's escape, a way to run from the complicated, messy reality of her life in Rio. But staying meant facing the possibility that everything she'd believed about Maxim, about herself, about art and love and truth, might be a lie. With trembling fingers, Camila ripped the boarding pass in two.
I need answers.
She said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice.
And I'm not going to find them in New York.
As they left the airport, the Rio sun hit Camila's face like a slap, hot and unforgiving. She squinted against the glare, feeling as though she were seeing her city, her home, for the first time. The drive back to her apartment was a blur of conflicting emotions. Relief at not leaving, fear of what she might discover, anger at Maxim for his secrets, and a deep, aching sadness for what might have been. Inside her tiny studio, Camila was confronted by the physical manifestation of her internal chaos. Half-packed boxes littered the floor. Unfinished canvases leaned against every available surface, each one a testament to her fractured state of mind over the past 2 weeks. One painting in particular caught her eye. It was the one she'd started the morning after the gallery opening, a swirl of storm gray and vibrant orange. Maxim's eyes in the favela sunset, intertwined in a dance of light and shadow. Camila approached it slowly, as if it might burn her. With trembling fingers, she traced the bold brushstrokes, feeling the texture of dried paint beneath her skin.
Who are you?
She whispered, unsure if she was asking the painting, Maxim, or herself. A knock at the door startled her from her contemplation. Camila opened it to find Mariana Duarte, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled.
You missed your flight.
Mariana stated, pushing past Camila into the apartment. Camila nodded, closing the door.
I couldn't. I saw the news about Maxim.
Mariana's eyes softened a fraction.
Ah, girl, I warned you about getting too close to that world.
Did you know?
Camila asked, hating the tremor in her voice.
About his activities?
Mariana sighed, sinking onto the worn sofa.
The art world is full of shadows, Camila. None of us are entirely clean. But Maxim, I never thought he'd go this far.
Camila felt tears pricking her eyes.
I don't know what to believe anymore. About him, about my art, about anything.
Mariana stood, approaching Camila with an unusually gentle expression.
Listen to me, girl. Your talent is real. Your passion is real. Don't let one man's mistakes taint that.
But how can I trust my own judgment?
Camila burst out, gesturing wildly at the chaos around her.
I thought I saw something in him, something real and beautiful. What if I'm just as fooled by my own art? What if it's all a lie?
Mariana grabbed Camila's shoulders, forcing her to meet her gaze.
Now you listen here. Art is never a lie. It's the truest thing we have. Your paintings, they speak to people, Camila. They make them feel something real.
She gestured to the unfinished canvas of gray and orange.
That is truth. That is beauty born from pain, from confusion, from love. Don't you dare doubt that.
Camila felt something crack inside her, a dam of emotion finally breaking. She collapsed into Mariana's arms, sobs racking her body. As the sun set over Rio, painting the sky in hues of fire and shadow, Camila cried for all she had lost, all she had never truly had, and all the uncertain possibilities that lay ahead. When she finally pulled away, wiping her eyes, she felt not healed, not whole, but perhaps a little stronger, a little more herself.
What now?
She asked, her voice hoarse. Mariana smiled, a glint of her usual sharpness returning.
Now, my dear, you paint. You take all this pain, this confusion, this beautiful mess, and you put it on canvas. Show the world who Camila Santos really is.
As Mariana left, Camila turned to face her studio. The half-packed boxes, the unfinished paintings, the newspapers splashed with Maxim's name. It all swirled before her like some surreal, fractured dream. But in the center of it all stood her easel, a blank canvas waiting. With a deep breath, Camila picked up a brush. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if she could ever trust Maxim, or herself, again. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had a story to tell, and she would tell it with every color, every stroke, every piece of her broken heart. The canvas before her was white and endless, full of possibility and terror in equal measure, just like the path ahead. But for the first time in weeks, Camila felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. She began to paint. Chapter 12. Shades of Truth. The last echoes of applause faded as the gallery emptied, leaving Camila alone with the aftermath of her triumphant solo exhibition, Fractured Truths. She stood before her centerpiece, a massive canvas that dominated the far wall, a riot of color and emotion, storm gray eyes peering out from a swirl of favela oranges and golds, shattered glass and broken chains intertwined with blooming flowers and soaring birds.
Quite the turnout, Ms. Santos.
A voice broke through her reverie. She turned to see George Harrington, the New York curator, approaching with a champagne flute in hand.
I must say I'm impressed. Your work has evolved since we last spoke.
Camila managed a small smile, though her stomach churned at the memory of their last encounter.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I've been on quite a journey these past few months.
George nodded, his eyes gleaming with something Camila couldn't quite place.
Indeed, and what a journey it's been. Tell me, have you reconsidered my offer? New York is still very much interested in your unique perspective.
As Camila opened her mouth to respond, a commotion outside the gallery caught her attention. Through the large windows, she saw a group of people in dark suits approaching rapidly. Suddenly, the gallery doors burst open. Camila's heart leapt into her throat as she saw Maxim stride in, flanked by several stern-looking individuals. His eyes locked with hers for a brief, electric moment before he turned to George.
George Harrington,
one of the suited individuals announced, flashing a badge.
You're under arrest for art forgery, fraud and involvement in an international crime syndicate.
George's face drained of color.
What? This is absurd. Maxim, what's going on?
Maxim's expression was a mix of triumph and regret.
It's over, George. They know everything.
As the Interpol agents moved to handcuff a sputtering George, Camila felt her world tilt on its axis. She stumbled back, bumping into her painting, the physical contact with her art grounding her in the surreal moment.
Maxim?
She whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise of George being read his rights. Maxim turned to her, his storm gray eyes filled with a maelstrom of emotions. Relief, exhaustion, hope, and something deeper that made Camilla's heart race.
Camila,
He breathed, taking a step towards her.
I can explain everything.
As the agents led George away, Maxim and Camilla found themselves alone in the gallery, surrounded by the raw emotion of her artwork.
What? What just happened?
Camilla managed, her mind reeling. Maxim ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of vulnerability she'd never seen from him before.
I've been working with Interpol as an informant for years. The rumors about my involvement in forgeries, they weren't entirely false, but not in the way you think.
Camilla's legs felt weak. She sank onto a nearby bench, trying to process this revelation.
I don't understand.
Maxim sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance.
My family, we've been in the art world for generations. I grew up surrounded by beauty, but also by whispers of fraud, of masterpieces that weren't quite what they seemed. When I realized the extent of the forgery network, how it was corrupting everything I loved about art, I couldn't stand by and do nothing.
So you became an informant?
Camilla said slowly, pieces falling into place. Maxim nodded.
I used my position, my connections, to get close to people like Harrington, to gather evidence, to help Interpol bring down the entire network. But it meant living in a world of half-truths and compromises.
His eyes met hers, raw with honesty.
Your art, your passion, your absolute commitment to truth. It shook me to my core, Camilla. It made me question everything, and it terrified me.
Why didn't you tell me?
Camilla asked, searching his face.
I wanted to. God, Camilla, you have no idea how much I wanted to, but I couldn't risk compromising the operation. And I was afraid of dragging you into this dangerous world, afraid of how I felt about you, afraid that once you knew the whole truth, you'd see me differently.
He reached into his jacket, pulling out a familiar object. Camilla's breath caught as she recognized her charm bracelet, the tiny fire extinguisher glinting in the gallery lights.
I found this,
Maxim said softly,
outside the Copacabana Palace. I've carried it with me every day since, a reminder of what I almost lost, of the truth I was too afraid to face.
With trembling hands, he held it out to her.
I'm not asking for forgiveness, Camilla. I'm asking for a chance to be honest, to be vulnerable, to create something real together if you'll have me.
Camilla stared at the bracelet, her heart pounding. All her fears and doubts crystallized in that moment. Fear of trust, of change, of losing herself in someone else's world. But as she looked at her paintings, at the raw truth she had poured onto canvas, she realized something profound. She was no longer the girl who had stumbled into Maxim's lap in a tiny cantina. She was an artist who had faced her demons and created beauty from pain. She was strong enough to love without losing herself. With a shaky breath, Camilla reached out, but instead of taking the bracelet, she gently closed Maxim's fingers around it.
Keep it,
She said softly.
as a reminder, not of what you almost lost, but of what we can build together.
Confusion flickered across Maxim's face, quickly replaced by hope, as Camilla intertwined her fingers with his.
I don't need a charm to remind me of who I am anymore.
She continued, her voice growing stronger.
I found my truth, Maxim, in my art, in myself, and I think I see that same truth in you. Your passion for preserving real art, for fighting against forgery and fraud, it's part of who you are.
Maxim's eyes shone with understanding and something that looked a lot like love.
Camilla,
But she silenced him with a finger to his lips.
No more words, not now.
She stood, tugging him gently to face her centerpiece.
Look.
As they stood hand in hand before the massive canvas, Camilla felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The painting was a reflection of her journey, the pain, the growth, the beauty found in broken places. But now, with Maxim beside her, she saw something new emerging from the chaos of color and form. Hope, possibility. A future painted in shades of trust and honesty and love.
It's us.
Maxim whispered, awe in his voice.
All of it. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the broken.
Camila nodded, squeezing his hand.
It's our masterpiece, if we're brave enough to create it together.
As they stood before the painting, their fingers intertwined, Camila felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had faced their fears, confronted their truths, and emerged stronger for it. The canvas of their future stretched before them, blank and full of possibility. And for the first time, Camila felt ready, eager even, to see what they could create together. It wouldn't be easy. There would be struggles and misunderstandings, moments of doubt and fear. But as Camila looked at their joined hands, at the art surrounding them, at the love shining in Maxim's eyes, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. It would be beautiful. Chapter 13. A Canvas of Love. The warm Rio sun filtered through the large windows of Camila's new studio, casting a golden glow over the canvases scattered around the room. 6 months had passed since the night of her exhibition, since the moment she and Maxim had chosen to face their future together. Camila stood before her easel, brush in hand, lost in the swirling colors before her. The painting was unlike anything she'd done before, a blend of her vibrant, favela-inspired style and elements of classical techniques she'd been exploring with Maxim's guidance. It was a perfect visual representation of how their lives had intertwined.
Camille.
Julio's voice called from the adjoining gallery space.
The new shipment from the community art program just arrived. Want to come see?
Smiling, Camila set down her brush and made her way to the front of the building. The small gallery she now ran, funded in part by Maxim's connections but very much her own creation, showcased works from emerging artists in the favelas. It was her way of bridging the two worlds she now inhabited, the glittering art scene of international acclaim and the vibrant, raw creativity of her roots. As she helped Julio unpack the new pieces, each one a testament to the untapped talent in their community, Camila felt a now familiar warmth bloom in her chest. This was everything she'd ever dreamed of, and so much more. The bell above the door chimed, and Camila looked up to see Maxim entering, a smile lighting up his face as their eyes met. Even after all these months, that smile still made her heart skip a beat.
I thought I might find you here,
he said, crossing the room to plant a soft kiss on her cheek.
How's the unpacking going?
Fantastically.
Camila beamed, holding up a small sculpture.
Look at this one, Maxim. The artist is only 14. Can you believe it?
Maxim took the piece, examining it with the same care and reverence he'd give a priceless masterpiece.
Extraordinary,
he murmured.
The use of negative space, the balance. Camila, you have an eye for talent.
Camila felt a flush of pride, not just at the compliment, but at the genuine enthusiasm in Maxim's voice. His passion for art, for nurturing new talent, matched her own perfectly.
Speaking of talent,
Maxim continued, a hint of excitement in his tone.
I have news. Remember that restoration project we discussed for the community center?
Camila nodded, her curiosity piqued.
Well, I spoke with the Louvre. They're willing to lend us an expert conservator for 6 months to train local artists in restoration techniques. It's a pilot program, but if it goes well...
Maxim, that's incredible,
Camila exclaimed, throwing her arms around him.
Do you know what this could mean for our community? For these artists?
As Maxim held her close, Camila marveled at how seamlessly their passions had aligned. His connections and resources, combined with her vision and community ties, were creating opportunities neither of them could have imagined alone.
I have one more surprise,
Maxim said softly as they parted.
Close your eyes.
Camila complied, a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation fluttering in her stomach. She felt Maxim take her hand, placing something cool and metallic in her palm.
Okay, open them.
Camila's eyes fluttered open, then widened in surprise. In her hand lay a key, attached to a familiar charm, the tiny fire extinguisher that had started it all.
Maxim,
she breathed, looking up at him questioningly. His storm gray eyes were soft with emotion.
It's a key to our new home. If you want it to be. I found a place that I think you'll love. It has a beautiful studio space overlooking the ocean, but it's just a short drive from here, from the community you love.
Camila felt tears pricking her eyes as the full weight of what Maxim was offering sank in. It wasn't just a home he was proposing, but a future. One that embraced both of their worlds, that celebrated their differences instead of fearing them.
Are you sure?
She asked, her voice barely a whisper.
Your work, your life in Moscow?
Maxim cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen.
Camila, you are my home now. My work can be done from anywhere. But my heart, it's here, with you, in this vibrant, beautiful world you've shown me.
Camila's heart soared. She looked around the gallery, at the paintings from her community artists, at Julio pretending not to eavesdrop as he arranged to display, at the half-finished canvas visible through the studio door that represented her evolving style. Then back at Maxim, whose eyes held a universe of love and possibility. In that moment, Camila saw their future unfold before her like a masterpiece coming to life. Mornings spent painting side by side, afternoons mentoring young artists, evenings hosting galleries that bridged worlds of art and culture. Challenges, certainly. Their backgrounds were still vastly different, and there would always be new obstacles to overcome. But also joy, growth, and a love that made every struggle worthwhile.
Yes.
She said, her voice strong and sheer.
Yes to the key, to our home, to everything.
As Maxim pulled her into a deep, passionate kiss, Camila felt a sense of completeness she'd never known before. They were two very different people, from two very different worlds, but together, they created something extraordinary. Like complementary colors on a canvas, they enhanced each other, creating a picture more vibrant and beautiful than either could achieve alone. Later that evening, as they stood on the balcony of their new home, watching the sun set over Guanabara Bay, Camila leaned into Maxim's embrace. The warm breeze carried the sense of the city, salt, spice, and possibility.
What are you thinking?
Maxim asked softly, his lips brushing her temple. Camila smiled, her fingers intertwining with his.
I'm thinking about art, about love, about how the most beautiful masterpieces are often created from unlikely combinations.
Maxim chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her back.
Like a clumsy waitress and a brooding art collector?
Exactly.
Camila laughed, turning in his arms to face him.
Who would have thought that spilled drink would lead to all this?
As their lips met in a tender kiss, Camila's heart swelled with joy and gratitude. Their journey hadn't been easy, and the road ahead would have its own challenges. But as she stood there, wrapped in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the beauty they'd created together, Camila knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was her masterpiece, and it was only the beginning.